Don't get caught up in what is pretty. You need to think about 5 years from now.
You're going to have to make some compromises. There's no such thing as a perfect home, and it's certainly, I don't think, going to be found for under $500,000.
Get your house on the market and know what you exactly have in your pocket.
Hello, I am Todd Hilton from the Hilton Home Team, and once again, this is Meaningful Moves. So I'm excited for today's episode. This is the first part of a two-part series that we're going to run, which is a home buyer's roadmap. So I'm really excited to get the input and feedback of our two regular guests. So to my left, we have Andrea Hilton, buyer rep extraordinaire from the past. I mean, she's always done such a great job with that. And when I say past, meaning that was really how you began in this business. And I want to know, and you've sort of transitioned
I still work with buyers.
Yeah, and you sort of transition though in what your focus is. But what are you seeing in your appointments right now with what's going on in the market?
What I'm seeing, especially in the waterfront and luxury market, is I am seeing a lot more properties. There's a lot more competition out there for sellers. And we are accustomed to seeing the competition for the buyers typically. So it just means that sellers are going to have to be that much more laser focused on presenting their home as well as they possibly can. And buyers have a few more choices to make.
And we know the buyers are out there because I know personally your schedule and I see how hard you're working right now. So we do know, so sellers know that the buyers are still out there, but you have to be ultra competitive to attract them and to keep their interest. So thank you so much. And beside Andrea is buyer rep extraordinaire, Anthony Field. He's also been extremely busy for quite a period of time of late. What are you seeing right now in sort of your viewings of what's going on in the market?
Well, what I'm seeing, and of course this kind of plays off exactly what Andrea just said, is it is still competitive, you know, and if you have a home that goes up that is priced appropriately and is something that people are looking for, you know, it will still go quickly. With that said, I think we have seen so much inventory come to the market that now buyers actually do have more options. You know, they certainly have more options now than they did a few months ago. And so I think buyers actually have the ability right now to kind of find some hidden gems, if you will, some homes that maybe slipped through the cracks. You know, maybe they had an offer date at the same time as a couple others at that same price point and didn't receive multiple offers, you know. So it's definitely still competitive if you're a buyer in the market right now. I would say, you know, dare I say, I think maybe it's cooled slightly over the past couple of weeks. But fortunately, like I said, there is still a good amount of inventory that if you are looking to buy and you're flexible with your wish list, I think you can actually get a home at a pretty fair value right now.
Well, thank you so much for that. So today we're going to talk about sort of the initial two phases in the home buying experience. First, we've all been there. If we own a home right now, first-time home buying. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about what we see as a second phase, which is sort of the first-time family home buyer, meaning they may have already been a first-time buyer once, and they're now transitioning in their life to that family home that they're aspiring to get towards. So I look forward to having our conversation today and getting the thoughts of both Anthony and Andrea on each of those topics. So let's start with first-time home buying. So first-time home buyer tip number one, don't go over your budget if you don't need to. So Anthony, what does that mean?
That just means, you know, being very aware of what your payments could be, what your mortgage payments could be, because, you know, there at times can be a very significant difference between the highest point that you're pre-approved to for your mortgage versus where you can comfortably continue to live your life. So it's very important that you don't necessarily just look at that highest number and say, okay, well, this is what we can work with. Take some time, do some math on your own, and make sure you find out what you're comfortable with. In addition to that, as we all know, there's no such thing as a perfect home. There are probably going to be at least a couple of things that you might want to change, or in terms of renovations or any sort of little project like that. So you want to ensure that you've budgeted for that. And furniture, there are all sorts of different things. Hate to say it, but sometimes random repairs come up, and if you don't have any sort of savings for that, it can put you in a tough spot. So I think just really being aware of where your comfort level is as far as your monthly payments goes, is just one of the most important things that a buyer can do right now.
That's great advice. I actually think you said something last episode that resonated with me that I didn't really think about it. You also said, in many cases, those are younger individuals. So there is a social life element to their lives. So don't max yourself out where you can no longer go out or go on vacations or afford the furniture or the hobbies that you love doing, because you're sort of house poor because you've used your entire disposable money to invest in that home. So that was a great point you made last time as well.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's very important to be aware of. And as we know, like in many areas in life, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So if you're looking at your friends or your peers who, maybe have higher income, or at least, have different financial particulars in their lives, you can't just look at what other people have and say, oh, that's where we need to be as well. You need to focus on yourself and make sure you're staying within your own comfort level.
I've never heard that quote before, and I think I'm going to use it. Comparison is the thief of joy. I like that. I think I'm going to use it. I'll call it my own.
Yeah, you're welcome to.
But I think that's a great comment. So first time buyer tip number 2, buy the best location that you can afford. What does that mean, and how important is that?
Yeah, so as we know, particularly in Greater Sudbury, value can change fairly significantly from area to area. Also, as we know, location is one of the few things that you cannot change about the home that you buy. There are a number of renovations that one can undertake in after purchasing their first home, but you can't really effectively pick it up and put it elsewhere. So, things like school zones, proximity to amenities, all that stuff, that's also going to be very important for your resale value when that time comes, because also, as we know, very rarely is somebody's first home their forever home. So, being mindful of your resale value, having a realistic idea of what your plan is, whether you think you're there for 5 years, 7 years, etc., is very important, and the location will really help with that process when the time comes to sell. Regardless of the state of the market, one thing that is consistent is we always see the homes in the better locations kind of maintain their value better than areas that are less sought after.
So that's a great point. It segues a little bit into what we're going to be talking with Andrea a little later on. So Andrea, how do you manage those conversations? Meaning, when you're working with a first-time home buyer, but that they are also talking about plans of starting a family, and that they're already forward-thinking in their career, how do you sort of manage those conversations where they may not be thinking of location first, and they may like pretty finishes as opposed to what's going to help them actually in their next move? How do you handle those conversations?
And I am very forward with clients about that. Don't get caught up in what is pretty. You need to think about 5 years from now. And I always I will never tell a client not to buy a home that they want to buy, but I really do give them the pros and the cons. If this is in a neighborhood that I don't feel comfortable with my daughter walking alone at night, I'm going to tell my client, you really need to give that some consideration. There are certain areas with some really, really pretty homes, but they might not be the best area for your lifestyle. If you want to be out jogging and walking at night, it might not be the most comfortable neighborhood. And if you are thinking of selling in 3 to 5 years, you really have to be mindful of how much you're going to pay for that home, because resale value in certain areas doesn't grow as quickly as resale value in other areas. And likewise, I will tell them, we're looking in a really great area and the house is a little lackluster. It needs a fresh coat of paint. The flooring could be changed and it's maybe a little smaller than a couple of the other houses we looked at, but it is in a great neighborhood. Well, now they can slowly, while they live in the house, do some projects, work at it, and they are really affecting their equity. They're really positively affecting their resale price. And those are the things that buyers sometimes have to consider.
Great input. So first time home buyer tip number 3, your first home doesn't need to be perfect. What does that mean, Anthony?
Well, when we're talking about first-time home buyers, generally speaking, we're looking at people who are shopping with a relatively limited budget in the grand scheme of things. And that makes sense. We're generally talking about younger people. It takes some time to put yourself in a position to be able to purchase your first home. The focus, in my opinion, really should be get yourself into the market and start building your equity, and there's all of these cliche sayings that we say, don't be paying somebody else's mortgage. You should be paying your own, things of that nature. But it's so very true. The reality of it is you're going to have to make some compromises, and you might surprise yourself if you make those compromises and find out that you're, a little more happy with your decision than you expected to be. But at the end of the day, there is no such thing as a perfect home. And it's certainly, I don't think, going to be found for under $500,000. That's just the way that it is. So really take the time, make sure that you know your non-negotiables versus things that you like. And at the end of the day, if you can get into the housing market for a relatively good value, it's the smart move to make. Really at as young an age that you can do it, because that is going to, it's like your stepping stone to your perfect home. You are going to work closer to that perfect home as you go, but it starts with the first home.
That is absolutely fantastic advice, and it's 100% correct. But it's also a little boring, meaning that we're in an HGTV culture. We see these great homes and all that. So it is the right advice. How do you have that conversation where someone may be looking at just pretty and in the present and not necessarily thinking about the future? How do you manage those conversations?
It can be a little difficult sometimes, and it can depend on the client. Some are, and to their credit, some are a little more particular, and sometimes it ends up being okay, and maybe their house search goes longer than expected, but ultimately they do find closest to perfect, that was out there. But I often find that buyers can kind of get themselves there as well, especially if they've maybe offered on a few of these, the bright, shiny new listings and get beat pretty handily. That sometimes they start to, I'll hear them kind of telling me, look, we're starting to think that maybe we're willing to look in this area when we said we weren't otherwise, or so on and so forth. So, I just always try to kind of gently guide my buyers in that direction. I find they do get there after a certain point, but I also like to let them kind of handle that on their own, rather than me sitting here and saying everything that you think you want, no, that's wrong. You need to buy this, inferior product instead, so you just have to be delicate with it. But I find you do get there over time.
Great advice from both of you. And ultimately, home ownership is a journey. And these 3 tips actually position you for the next phase. And we're going to be discussing that a little bit with Andrea in a second. So obviously, as we go to our next phase, these are the move up or family home buyers. So we've been in our first house for a number of years, 3 to 5, for example. We're now in a position where we've started a family or want to start a family, and we're beginning to think about that next move either in advance or as a response or reaction to maybe not having enough space right now in our first home. So that's where we go. So tip number 1 for that group, move up buyers, tip number 1, start with a home that you already own, meaning where should their thoughts be beginning this process?
Yeah, don't start looking for another home until you know what your market value for your current home is, until you know what you're going to get for that home. You really don't know what you can spend on your next home. Make sure you know how much equity you have in that home, so you know what it's worth now. Now you know what you owe on it. How much equity do you have in that home, and how much is going to go towards your next home? What are some of the things that you need to do to get your current home ready for sale? Do I have to do a fresh coat of paint, or are there some small repairs that I have to do? Know what you need to do with your current home, know how much it is worth, know how much equity you have, and now you are prepared for the next step of deciding where and what that next home is going to be.
For fear of hijacking the episode, I'm going to ask the age-old question, and there probably is no exact answer. It all depends. Should I list first or should I buy first? There's no perfect answer, but if someone asked you that question, what would you say?
I always say you need to list your house. You need to know what you've got, and you need to be ready to move. So start thinking about where you want to go. You'll have an idea what your budget is going to be. Start looking even at real estate, but get your house on the market and know what you exactly have in your pocket. If at all possible, you need to sell your house first. Nothing more devastating than someone finding the perfect home that they want to move into, and they put a condition that they have to sell their home because you need the money from the home that you currently have. And even if that offer is accepted, so many times someone else comes along and bumps you out of that position because you haven't sold your house. Sell your house first, if at all possible.
I know traditionally, especially when it was a very strong seller's market, they were always fearful of not being able to find the right one. Mm-hmm. Now that we've shifted to higher inventory levels and more of a buyer's market, how has that changed the advice?
I mean, it does. I'm giving the same advice: sell your house first, but it does give them maybe a little bit less anxiety because there are more homes to choose from. But we can always, in your listing, when you list your house, we can always say we're not willing to move for 90 days. We're not willing to move for 60 days. Or the less preferable in the scenario of listing your house is to say the sale of the house is conditional on me finding something else. At least you will know what your budget looks like. At least when it comes time to move on offering on a house, if it is a house that's highly desirable, you need to have the cleanest offer possible. Make it as appealing for that seller as possible. So you don't want to have to put any unnecessary conditions in there.
Absolutely. I mean, we deal with it all the time, and people are creative in the way they do it. So we've worked with some that need to sell a home, want to get it ready, so maybe they're reaching out to family members that'll help with sort of the down payment on number 2 to allow that transition. It's about being creative to make that happen, right?
Or exploring the option of using the equity in your current home as a down payment and looking at a bridge mortgage. And those are some things that people can do too if they're not 100% comfortable selling their home first. Talk to your mortgage professional. Ask them, okay, what are the things that I can do? If I want to buy a second home that I want to live in, maybe I'm going to rent this home, or maybe I'm just going to wait and sell it a little bit later. What does it look like for me financially to carry 2 mortgages for a little while? What does it look like for me in penalties once I do sell once I do sell my original home. So those are all things you have to explore, and those are all conversations that you need to be having with your realtor and then your mortgage professional.
Great point. Great point. So move up buyer tip number 2. Buy for tomorrow, not just for today.
Yeah, you've already bought your first home, and a lot of times, I'll be honest with you, your first home purchase is based on your financial ability. It may not be the home you're staying in forever. You're going to do everything you can to make it your own. But when you're moving on to your second home, you need to have a little more thought put into it. A lot of times people's second home is no longer a stepping stone home. It's going to be for their forever home. So the things that you really need to be looking at are your long-term goals. Is this planning to be my forever home? Because if it suits your lifestyle today, that's great. But what's your lifestyle going to look like in 5 years? What's your lifestyle going to look like in 10 years? Do you have the job that you're probably going to be in for a long time? And what does the commute from that house look like? Do your children now or your future children, are they going to be involved in sports? Are they going to be involved in theater? What is that commute going to look like? Certain lifestyle things. Are you somebody who wants to get out hiking in the morning before you head to work? Well, maybe living in a tight-knit neighborhood is not going to be the ideal scenario. Do you need to live a little bit outside of the city to meet your lifestyle needs? Or are you the guy who wants to be right in the center of it all, that you need to be close to the restaurants, you need to be close to your lifestyle. So basically, you're thinking, not today, but what does my lifestyle look like going forward? Where do I need to be? And obviously, you have budgetary, is that even a word?
Yeah.
Budgetary? Okay.
Yeah.
You have budgetary concerns. Look at me using words. You have, you have to look at what your budget looks like and where you can get the most bang for your buck that works for you within your own budget.
That's such a valuable bit of advice because, we've worked with people in the past that have come across a property that ticks almost every single box, but it's 50 minutes from town. So as they begin to sort of think about acting lessons at Creative Loft or hockey practice or whatever, if they'd made that move, and they chose not to because that one little item, although everything else seemed perfect, was negative. You're going to say something. Sorry.
I'm having that conversation with clients right now. We're early enough in the search, and they're falling in love with certain houses. They fell in love with one house, and I said, okay, let's think about your commute here. Let's think about your future lifestyle. I had that exact conversation because it was a long distance and not a great commute. Now, they are people who need to be in town and close to the action and close to the activities. So they really had to consider, oh yeah, I really, really, really love that house, but could I realistically live there and live my lifestyle? And I think the answer they came to was no. I've had other people who've fallen in love with a house in the middle of everything. And I'm actually working with a client right now who they fell in love on their previous home, the home they live in now. They loved the house. It was a pretty neighborhood. All of the houses are so well maintained. And they realize they're not people. There's a lot of activity and it makes them anxious. They need to be looking at a property that is a little bit more remote. They're not into the scene of socializing, and they need to find their peace. So they're now looking for a home that suits their lifestyle. Quite the opposite of the first people who need to be in the hub. They're looking to get away from the hub. And you really need to know what your goal is. That's where we talk about long term. What does your lifestyle look like? Because you can find any house that you love, but if it doesn't suit your lifestyle, both in its location or its neighborhood or its neighbors, it's a beautiful house, but you're not happy there.
Great point. And it's sort of a jumping block onto our next point. Move up homebuyer tip number 3. Buy a lifestyle, not just more space. What does that mean?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to expand on what I was saying. I jumped the gun. Those thoughts are all in there. Yeah, you know what your lifestyle is. So if your lifestyle is that outdoorsy hiking, maybe not peopling so much, then you have to start looking at homes that meet that lifestyle. Maybe you're going to look at a little bit more property. Maybe you're going to be looking at not only the number of bedrooms that you need for your family, but what's surrounding that house. And on the other hand, if you are really involved in lessons and sports with your kids and they're all in one area of town, you want to make that commute as minimal as possible so that you can actually enjoy your lifestyle. It's great to say I've got this beautiful house and it fits all the kids in my family and it fits me. But every single day I'm driving an hour and 10 minutes to work, and then I'm driving an hour and 10 minutes back home from work, and then I'm driving 45 minutes to take my kids to their hockey practice or their dance practice or their acting class. Your lifestyle is not going to feel as great as that house looks. So find the house that suits your lifestyle. And also, what are your long-term plans for your lifestyle? Maybe you don't have the kids right now and shooting off to work for an hour doesn't bother you, but in 5 years, or maybe you've got a baby, so going to work and daycare is not a problem. But in 5 or 6 years, when the kid is in lessons and you might have another child who now you have to tag along, those commutes can be something that become very tiresome. And they take away from your lifestyle. Living in that location might take away from your lifestyle. So you really have to make those considerations.
I guess that's sort of the sad irony of that whole process. In many cases, people look at their move-up home, and it's sort of that opportunity to begin to create family memories there and take a look at what the future is based on this picture that they have for the future. And then if they make the wrong locational move, it actually detracts from that vision. You're now 50 minutes there, 50 minutes back, 7 days a week. So it's probably difficult. So how do you get someone in the right headspace, Anthony, of thinking about this, that when they're 24, 25, and they like these things, but based on your conversations with them that they are wanting to start a family? So how do you have that conversation as they're buying their first home to really help them make the right decision on that one, to help them get to the point that Andrea's talking about in the future?
I just try to just remind them of like the grand scheme of things, throughout the process. Just generally make comments about how it's important to look in the long run and more than just what is in front of you at the present time. I think, if I do know them that well, and I do know that they have had those discussions about, starting a family, things of that nature, then, I would feel comfortable enough to just say, you don't need to have it necessarily completely sorted out now, but have a rough idea of what your general game plan does look like. Have a general sort of feel for roughly how long you think you'll be at your first home, where you would like to be for your second one, reasons for why you would like to be where you want to be, and make sure that you take the time and really go through all the pros and cons to each location, and really just do your due diligence in ensuring that, that ideal location is in fact going to be what's best suited for your life.
Perfect. So today we've talked about sort of the first 2 phases in the home ownership journey. We talked about first-time home buyers, and we talked about sort of move up and family home buyers. So to sort of wrap things up, Anthony, what's one thing that sort of resonates or sticks out to you if someone's to clip just this part for first-time home buyers, what do they need to be thinking? What do you recommend, and is the best tip they can think of?
Best tip I can think of for a first-time home buyer would have to be buying affordably, buying at a level that you are comfortable with, you can maintain or achieve the lifestyle that you desire, and that you do not put yourself in a position where you are house broke. I think that is by far the biggest piece of advice that I can give to any first-time home buyer.
I actually saw a quote once that the perfect first home is the one that gets you started. I mean, that's exactly it, meaning a start always has other steps after it. But if you can see sort of your vision, or at least a rough outline of your vision of what the future looks like for you, it'll help steer you to make the right decision on that first one. So Andrea, I'm going to bounce over to you from a move-up family home buyer perspective. Just one, if they clip the spot and it's just one tip of anything that we've talked about, what's the number one thing they need to be thinking about?
They need to be thinking about their long-term goals. What is coming in the future? How is this next purchase going to support their lifestyle as they go on?
So really the best real estate decisions aren't about what's sort of finding what works now. It's realizing what's going to work in your future.
Yeah, think long term.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great bit of advice. So whether you're a first-time home buyer or you're moving up, these are tips that you can apply to help you on your journey of home ownership through your life. Now, these are essential because as you work your way through that journey, you need to be making the correct decisions at each phase to position you better for that next step. So I want to thank Andrea and Anthony for joining me today and talking about these first two steps in the journey. Stay tuned for our next episode, which will talk about 3 other steps that you're going to love to learn about. Until next time, take care.